In this lecture, we will begin our discussion of monopolistic competition. We're going to first talk about what exactly monopolistic competition is. We're going to see that it is a market structure that lies somewhat between perfect competition and monopoly. And it's going to have some characteristics of both of these market structures, which we've already discussed. And we will talk about how monopolistically competitive firms choose how much they're going to output and how much to charge, and how these decisions differ in the short run and the long run. We will also talk about whether monopolistically competitive firms can earn economic profits in the short run and in the long run. So a monopolistically competitive market, again, is kind of a hybrid of monopoly and perfect competition. So there are many different firms, and there's free entry and free exit. So in this way, the market looks a lot like perfect competition. However, each one of these firms sells a slightly different product. So a key result from this is that each firm is going to face a downward sloping demand curve, and there's going to be that same split between the demand curve and marginal revenue curve that we saw in monopoly. So what we mean when we say product differentiation is that consumers, and this is important, consumers see that there, or perceive that there are differences between the products of different firms. So this nice little graphic just lays out the differences between the market structures and how monopolistic competition has characteristics of both perfectly competitive markets and monopolies. So again, it has many sellers, that's like perfect competition. It has differentiated products, that's more like monopoly. And there's free entry and exit, and that's more like perfect competition. So how could firms differentiate their products? Well, we might think that there could be style or preference tastes, so you can think of all the different locations where you can spend money on clothes. There may be differentiation based on location, so gas stations may try to locate in certain areas, dry cleaners, barbershops. You could also think about all of the restaurants along the Galliard. So products may be differentiated based on quality. So you may think of Baja Fresh tacos versus Taco Bell. You may also think of McDonald's versus Culver's. Both of these are cases where firms are trying to differentiate their products, maybe based on price or based on quality. So the trade-off for consumers usually is you can have lower quality and lower prices, or you can have higher quality and higher prices. So since a monopolistically competitive firm sells a differentiated product, that means it has market power. And again, this is a way in which monopolistically competitive markets kind of look like monopolies. So a monopolistically competitive firm is still going to use the same profit maximizing rule. It will choose a quantity of output where marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost. And then once it finds that quantity, it will charge a price on the demand curve at that quantity. So we're going to see that price is going to be greater than marginal cost. So what does this look like graphically? Well, just like with monopoly, we can have a profitable situation or a non-profitable situation. So here we have two demand and marginal revenue curves. And in our profitable situation, we may have cost curves that look something like this. So what is our monopolistically competitive firm going to do in this situation? Again, we're dealing with the left graph here first. Well, it's going to choose a quantity where marginal cost is equal to marginal revenue. We know that's the profit maximizing quantity. The next decision it has to make is what price to charge. To figure out the price, it traces that quantity up to the demand curve and over. And that gives you the price it will charge. And then its costs will be given by the average total cost curve at that quantity. The difference between the price and the average total cost curve will give you the firm's profits. One other extension that you can notice here is that if I wanted to calculate how much revenue the firm made, I would simply look at the rectangle given by price and quantity. So revenue is price times quantity. So this whole rectangle here tells me how much revenue my firm is making. If I wanted to figure out how much my firm's total costs were at this output level, well, that would be the rectangle given by average total cost times quantity. So then my total profit is my revenues minus my costs. So then I take my revenue given by this big rectangle here minus my costs given by this rectangle here, and the difference is my profit. So now what does a firm look like that's making a loss in the short run? Well, I may have cost curves that look something like this. Again, my firm is going to produce where marginal cost is equal to marginal revenue. That's this quantity here. What price is my firm going to charge? Well, it traces that price up to the demand curve and over. So here's my price. Here's my average total cost. So here my firm is making a loss in the short run. So just a quick graph summary of what's going on. My firm is going to set a quantity, an output level where marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost. The price is determined by the height of the demand curve at this level of output, and the firm can make either a profit or a loss, and it depends on where the average total cost curve is in relation to the demand curve at this output level. So what happens in the long run? Well, we kind of saw in the short run that the model looks a lot like a monopoly. Well, in the long run, we're going to kind of have this weird hybrid of monopoly and perfect competition. So we have free entry and exit in our marketplace. So that means that if firms are earning profits in the short run, new entrants will come into the market, and that will happen until there are no profits left. So that will happen until price is equal to average total cost. But our firm is still going to charge a markup of price over marginal cost. And it's not going to produce at the minimum possible average total cost like we saw in perfect competition. So what does this look like graphically? Well, what's going to happen is let's say that our firms are making profits in the short run. Well, new entrants are going to come into the market, and that's going to cause the demand curves for each firm to shift inward. So this is going to happen until our demand curve is just tangent to the average total cost curve, where the associated marginal revenue curve crosses the marginal cost curve. So we have the demand and the marginal revenue curves moving inward as we move from the short run to the long run until we get this tangent condition. So the opposite thing will happen if the industry is experiencing losses in the short run. Some firms will leave the market. That will shift the demand and the marginal revenue curve out until we get to the same tangent condition. And again, this is going to stop until profits are zero. So how are profits equal 0 here? Well, our firm produces where marginal revenue equals marginal cost, and the price that firm charges is given by the height of the demand curve at that quantity. The average total cost is given by the height of the average total cost curve at that quantity, and these two things are the same. So in the long run, we're always looking for this tangency between the demand curve and the average total cost curve, where marginal revenue crosses marginal cost. So remember I said that the firm is not producing at its minimum possible average total cost. You can see that here. If this were perfect competition, my firm would be producing out here. So we can compare these two market structures in the long run: monopolistic competition and a perfectly competitive market. So here's my monopolistically competitive market in the long run. Again, here's that tangency between the demand curve and average total cost curve at the quantity that's output. Well, here's what my perfectly competitive market looks like. Again, here in perfect competition, price is equal to minimum average total cost. It's equal to that point where average total cost crosses the marginal cost curve. So we would call this quantity of output the efficient quantity that would be output. Well, look what's different with monopolistic competition. I'm not producing at the efficient quantity. I'm producing here. So I'm charging a higher price and I'm producing less in the long run than I would have if this were perfect competition. Even though I'm making zero profits here the same way as I would make zero profits here. So we would call this difference right here between the efficient quantity of output and the quantity that I'm actually outputting excess capacity. So to find excess capacity, you take the efficient quantity where marginal cost crosses average total cost is at its minimum, subtract off the quantity that the monopolistically competitive firm would produce. That is excess capacity. The markup, which is the difference between the price and marginal cost, is given by, again, this vertical distance. So whatever the difference between the price and marginal cost is, that is what we will call the markup. So just a summary of what we've talked about so far. We've introduced another market structure, monopolistic competition. It is characterized by free entry, many firms selling differentiated products. It has, again, it's kind of this hybrid of perfect competition and monopoly. And as far as market structures go, it's probably the most realistic and prevalent market structure in our economy. So you think of all of these different goods where there are a lot of different firms selling slightly different things. Restaurant meals are a classic example. You go into a store to buy clothing, you can buy different brands of jeans. Those different brands are all trying to differentiate themselves. So this is probably the most realistic and prevalent market structure. So monopolistic competitors like monopolists, they have control over what price they will charge. They face downward sloping demand curves. They're still going to set prices where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. They can make economic profits in the short run, but not necessarily in the long run. Just like perfect competition, they will make zero profits. But they will produce at a level that is less than perfect competition. They will charge a price that is higher than perfect competition, and they will still charge a markup over marginal cost in the long run. In the next lecture, we will talk about some more characteristics of monopolistically competitive markets and advertising.